Hi, I'm Kasia Kuzmicz-Kowalska and welcome back to Science on Trial and Error. It's Tuesday evening and yes, I'm a bit late with the recording of this intro as well as with episode 4, which was supposed to premiere yesterday. But I hope you'll forgive me. Quick announcements. Wow, your interest in episode 3 was huge. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm. I'm thrilled and looking forward to hearing more from you. Please send your feedback via social media or to our email at scienceontrialanderror@gmail.com. A warm welcome to all our new followers on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Spotify. Your support is incredibly exciting and encouraging. For more behind-the-scenes content and sneak peeks of future guests, head to our Instagram. On LinkedIn, we dive deeper into career-centered topics from the episodes. If you enjoy the podcast and wish to support us in covering software license costs and expanding our project, you'll find the link to our Buy Coffee page in the episode description. This week's conversation is an important one. We dive deep into decisions. Spontaneous, seemingly random, but often life-changing decisions, as well as well-thought-out big life choices. One of the main reasons for starting this podcast was to explore this very topic. Choices and decision-making processes, searching for your own path. And it seems that I found the perfect partner for this discussion, Ryan Cubero. Ryan's journey has been full of twists and turns, bumps and detours. Reflecting on his scientific career, Ryan candidly discusses how he may have rushed through some decisions, tries to understand his reasons in hindsight, and shares the biggest turning point of his life, the decision to step outside of academic realm. This episode is about self-reflection and growth, healing and learning. It's a rich and a bit lengthy conversation, but trust me, you'll enjoy it. A bit more about Ryan. He comes from the Philippines, where he earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in physics. He then moved to Trieste, Italy, where his growing interest in biology led to a challenging PhD project in statistical physics, using bioinformatics and network theory tools to study interactions between microRNAs. During this project, he frequently moved between Norway and Italy, and he found that very difficult. He then completed 2 postdocs, first at the Kavli Institute for Systems Neuroscience in Trondheim in Norway, and then at Institute of Science and Technology Austria ISTA, where our paths should have crossed, as we largely overlapped in our time there, but somehow didn't. At ISTA, Ryan switched his field of study yet again, showcasing his fearless attitude towards big changes. Now, Ryan is a data scientist and bioinformatician at Quantro Therapeutics, a startup company using time-resolved transcriptomics to find the first-hand effects, so-called fingerprints, of genetic perturbations, either through drugs or protein degradation. In our conversation, we discussed data science, the challenges of changing scientific fields, moving to different places, and shifting careers. We also touch on citizen science, transitions, interactions, and there is plenty about books for those of you who wait for some more bookish content. It's a fantastic conversation, so sit back, grab your tea, coffee, or matcha latte, and listen to Ryan's story. His laughter is contagious. You won't be able to resist laughing along. Enjoy and welcome, Ryan Cubero. Hi, Ryan. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great. I just came back from a vacation. So I was in Madrid for some time. It was great because I get to go on a holiday which is guilt-free and work-free.
Yes.
Which is probably the first time
Oh my God, I
in
had
a
the
long while.
same thing in December. It was my first
Uh-huh.
holiday ever where I
Yeah.
didn't think about work. I didn't feel guilty. It was very transformative experience. So I
Yeah,
can
I
relate.
know.
Absolutely. It was really good.
I know. And just to be able to disconnect
Yeah.
with what's going on, and then at some point realizing that, okay, yeah, I think now I'm ready to come back. I'm ready to go back to work.
But you actually
I'm
want
ready
to,
to,
right? Because you
yeah,
rested and you kind of. I love that.
yeah, me too. You're giddy after a few days, and then like, I'm missing what I do for work.
So where did you
Which is,
go?
we were in Madrid. It's my
Ah,
first time as well
nice.
in a Spanish city. So
Spain is
yeah,
very good for relaxing.
it is. It is.
I don't know, the food, the general culture is just very relaxed, supporting. I
Yeah,
absolutely agree. Huh.
yeah.
That's good. No,
Yes.
I'm glad you're relaxed. I can see it that you had a good
Uh-huh.
time. So
Oh, thank you.
okay, so let's dive into today's conversation. Our guest
Yeah.
is Ryan Cubero, and Ryan
Hello.
is currently a bioinformatician and data scientist at Quantro Therapeutics and will share with us some details about his job, but also about the many, many transitions that he had in his life as a scientist. And I am very much looking forward to hearing all about this. So, to start, how about you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your day-to-day tasks and your
Okay.
general overview of your job?
How to say? It's always interesting to talk about what I do for work. Yeah, because you kind of just get data from your colleagues as kind of a gift that you unwrap and then you try to understand what is in there. Essentially, I do a lot of algorithms development, data analysis, trying to come up with, I don't know, clever ways in how to see data sets and digging into and trying to find some insights, more insights than what you can do with basic analysis. And that's kind of the part of the job that I think I have been doing for quite some time now. And even with my current position, it's like I've never really transitioned out of academia.
Okay.
That's something that I appreciated with my current position.
So how big is the company?
It's a mid-sized startup company, so at the moment we are currently at I think 15.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
that's very
yeah,
academic size also.
so the company is now in its third year. So I think 15 is quite big. We are also still growing. So we had two colleagues who joined last week. So I
Ah,
will have to, yeah, meet them for the first time tomorrow.
oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Startup work has very interesting dynamics. I mean, my husband now is also in a startup, so I get to hear a little bit about it. And it seems like you have your own tasks, but you're also working very closely with your colleagues because the
Yeah,
team is not very big. And
yeah.
how are you liking this aspect?
Yeah, because when I decided what to do next, I was trying to figure out whether staying in academia or going to the private sector. Startup is kind of like a good middle ground. It depends, of course. Each startup company has their own work environment that they cultivate.
True.
But if you do get lucky, then you get to be in a company that still has the academic culture being relaxed and free, and you don't feel like you're part of a cog in the wheel. I would say this is, of course, my first job outside academia, so I really cannot speak of how it would feel like to be in a proper private sector where you have a task and
Yeah.
that's essentially what you're focused on.
Do you have a lot of freedom in how you go about your job, how you approach the analysis and all of that?
Yes, I do consider myself lucky because I got into a job where they wanted to try out several new things, several algorithms, ways into how to analyze the data. And if I have some ideas of how to make things better, then it's also welcome.
That's
So
good. Yeah.
that's the academic culture that I appreciated that was kept in the company. Although there are some tasks that are defined, how you finish the task, yeah, you can come up with your own ways on how to do it.
That's really nice. I feel like a certain degree of freedom is very important when you just left academia and you've been used to having a lot of freedom, let's be honest. And we are also often working a lot alone, even though we may be part of a team. It's hard to transition into a very hardcore teamwork right away. So I feel like this is a very good middle ground. I agree. How did you get to do this job? Were you actively searching? Was it a bit of luck? What happened?
Yeah. When I left my previous postdoc position, I kind of accepted that I will be in unemployment for quite some time. Mm-hmm. Austria it's a very nice country to stay in because they do have very good unemployment benefits.
Absolutely.
And that kind of eased me into, this idea of being unemployed, although there's a lot of psychological things that you kind of need to face, questions about who are you without your job? But that's probably we can come back to this one later on. I was just looking around for whatever jobs are here in Vienna. Decided to stay in Austria.
Yeah.
Because I know that there are a lot of biotechnology companies in here. And so getting a job as a bioinformatician or a data scientist working in biology would be simpler, simpler compared to, say, Italy, for example. Mm-hmm. And I was just applying. And of course, there were a lot of rejections. But with this company in particular, the moment I saw the job advertisement, I said, I really want to be here. I think everything just aligned. I knew the papers where the company is founded. Yeah. I knew the technology, the sequencing technology that they employ. I knew the senior bioinformatician.
Okay, that's always helpful.
No, I know him by name because I was reading the papers.
Okay, so like not knew him, but knew of him. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I knew of him. And the moment I saw his name in the company roster, I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to learn from him.
Okay, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, that's a good reason, definitely.
There was just a lot of motivation to get into this company to begin with. It's a bit cliche and corny, but the stars just aligned. And I really appreciate how lucky I am to be able to do what I'm doing at the moment.
So how long have you been in the company now?
So I started in the middle of October.
Okay.
I ended my previous job in the end of July. Mm-hmm. So really very soon. I was thinking I'd be on unemployment for 6 months at least.
That's the usual. I think it takes a lot of time for them to reply, so the assumption is correct. I also had this assumption, and somehow I only had 2 weeks break between ending my previous job and starting the new one. So it was a bit too short, honestly.
Yeah, it is.
But I had to because they needed someone, and I was like, it's too good of an opportunity. Yeah. So I was hoping to be on unemployment, but didn't work out. But totally understand the stars align situation, and it's good to grasp at these opportunities when they just happen, and it seems to be fitting your current goals, and it sounds very good.
Yeah.
It's very funny because we were both at Easter and somehow we never talked.
I know.
The thing is, of course, you don't know everybody, but I've been there for a really long time because it was 7 years, literally, so really long. Somehow we never interacted. But then when I was looking for someone with data science background for the podcast, you were recommended actually by a few people.
Okay.
I was like, oh my God, this guy, I haven't talked to him. And then you were always so nice reaching out about the podcast. Thank you so much. So I'm very happy we get to now have a short conversation.
I was a fan of a podcast. For some reason, it just popped out in my Spotify. And I don't know her. She seems to work in East as well, but she has interviewed people who I know.
True, because the first season was largely East-centered, I agree.
And then I was like, this is nice. And also the aim, basically, of the podcast was also really nice, and taking care of your mental health and talking about it, but at the same time as well talking about science and what people do day to day. I was really a fan from the beginning, and then
this is so cute. I cannot.
When the opportunity came, when you were looking for someone who works as a data scientist, and I was like, me.
I love that. Honestly, I feel like people should do this more. Why not? I also do this from time to time when someone is looking for volunteers, because if you have something to say and you're not shying about this, then why not? And
Right.
I'm really glad we now can interact, because it turns out there is much more than ISTA that we have in common.
Really?
And I think during this conversation, it will, I mean, not location-wise, but just like life-wise, I would say. So I'm very keen on going through your journey and pointing out the things that are very similar to mine.
Maybe that's why I really resonated as well with the episode that you had about where you talk about yourself.
Really?
Yeah, and a lot of those things as well made me smile. As I was listening to it, because it also speaks a lot about the experiences that I had as an academic and then transitioning.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to whatever we are going to talk about.
How about we still stay with the transition? I know that you had a bunch of them. So just to wind this up, you started with physics back in the Philippines, then you went to Italy for another diploma. Was it a PhD? Yes, it was a PhD. Then you went to Norway. Then you ended up at IST or ISTA doing your postdoc. So you made a bunch of transitions, and somehow you started with physics, ended up in a neuroscience lab, which already is a number of big jumps.
It is.
Honestly, my first question is, how about we talk a little bit about your decision process? So why changing the places so much? What was the reason? Was it purely scientific? Were there other reasons? So let's start with this. How about you take us to your physics for start? And then we can go even farther back if you want.
Yeah, so I started in physics. I come from the Philippines and the southern part of the Philippines. Physics was not really, the first option. People didn't even know that a physics degree exists, me included. And I only knew of a physics degree on my last year of high school before I had to go to university. And I was so, I don't know, it felt glamorous at that time.
Okay, yeah, I can see why. Yeah.
Especially because I grew up being the sciencey smart kid, a good all-arounder, I would say. When I finished high school, there was quite a lot of options that I was looking for. But then I really couldn't decide even towards the last day. And so my mom and I, we made a lottery. So we had some small pieces of paper. We wrote down, this is the university where I will go. And when I'm in this university, this is the course that I will take. And then just drew every time. It was physics. And like the last thing even was, okay, just to be sure, we were shaking the papers and one flew out and surprise, surprise, it was physics. So I said, okay, this is it.
This is so random, honestly.
I didn't really enjoy physics in the beginning.
It can be tough. I mean,
it was
so
tough.
much math, and
I didn't mind the math, but a lot of it was just like regret, mainly because I didn't really have good science teachers growing up. Of course, I had some good science teachers, but not a good physics teacher. So I guess I would say I went for a subject that I was the weakest in and continued that path, because I knew had I taken biology, I would do good. I also knew if I went to chemistry, I had a good chemistry teacher, I'd also do good. But physics came, I don't know, out of the blue.
So you wanted to kind of find out more about the thing you didn't know enough about.
Yeah,
is that it?
I think so.
Okay.
There wasn't really a lot of good training in that subject, and my understanding of physics was lacking. So the first 2 years, which was all foundational physics, I really struggled, even though I've had good grades. I was always crying. I can remember days before the exam and studying, I was crying to my mom, like, oh, please let me. I want to shift courses. This is too painful. And then I go back home with the best grades that one can have. And then my mom is just like, you're crying for nothing. And so it was that cycle for like 2 years.
That sounds exhausting.
Oh, I think it was, yes. But the third year, I started to appreciate physics, mainly because I have had a good mechanics professor. And I didn't really see the connection between physics and a lot of math. up until you take the major physics courses. And when I got to do some fancy mathematics and not just plug things in the calculator towards the end and then you get your answer, but instead you have all of these variables just floating around. And then at some point you try to simplify everything, and then poof comes some things that you can read things out of.
Which part of the physics was your biggest love then?
Oh, I was so in love with quantum physics. Had I stuck with physics, I would have been a quantum physicist through the end. I don't know exactly which quantum physics realm I would specialize in. I was already working with something like dissipative quantum systems. So it's a quantum mechanics where you break the energy conservation. I thought I was going to specialize in that. But then at some point, I was diagnosed with an immune disease. And then talking to the doctor, I couldn't understand what he was saying. And then I tried to read up on some articles about the disease and things that play out around it, the biology around it. And I didn't know what was going on. But it was this feeling of there's a lot of things going on. It's so complex. I don't know where to start. I was seeing some cells moving in my head that had sparkles.
Okay, yeah. You suddenly discovered that there's this entire huge world of biology, of so many things coming up all the time. And
yeah. And it was around the time when I was taking up some history and philosophy of science, and my professor then was bashing biology as a stamp collecting field. You just write down things, everything is qualitative. It's very much kind of this Linnean viewpoint of biology. But then all of a sudden, oh, hey, there is these things that you can describe with equations, probably. There's a lot of things moving, and it's not just classifying things, and this looks fun. That kind of prompted the move towards biology. And I went to Italy. I was doing this graduate diploma for condensed matter physics. But that time, I already knew I wanted to do something in biology, so much that my classmates were telling me, oh, he's the biology guy. What is this biology guy doing in a physics class?
Cute.
I kind of like, at that point, I was knowing quite a lot more of biology than my classmates. And it was strange finding myself in this place where I am the foreign one.
Okay, yeah, by so many different ways, right?
Exactly. That whole kind of transition going towards neuroscience was probably, I would say, trying to improve on things that I don't know too much about. I was in quantum physics, and then I jumped to condensed matter physics, statistical mechanics, a subject that I was very weak at. And then transitioned to biology and did some computational stuff. And coding is something that I was very bad at in university.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. We had a computational physics course, and I had to team up with someone who can code. So I was the one who was doing the theory part, solving the equations by hand and simplifying things. I'm still talking with that friend today, and we were just like laughing about it. And then I went to neuroscience, a subject that I didn't have any idea. I didn't have a clue. And then when I was looking for what to do next for my postdoc, I ended up in microglia field. Something that I also have no idea. So it was just trying to, I don't know, I'm still trying to understand, the series of decisions that I have made. But I think a lot of it is being curious about what is there.
Yeah, curiosity definitely driving you, right? Like trying to find out more about stuff you don't know about that are curious. Yeah. It's interesting because, initially when we might choose based on our curiosity, we might choose based on our parents' expectations or cultural surrounding expectations. Then usually you reach the point where you start thinking, okay, I think this is my path, I'm going to go in this direction. Especially when you start doing the PhD, you need to have something in mind. And you were making a lot of very difficult transitions. Because it's not just like changing a small field, like I changed from cell biology to developmental biology. I mean, of course, it required me to acquire new knowledge, but it was not as major as me suddenly jumping into physics or something like that. And you also moved several times, which must have been difficult as well. So I'm kind of impressed. I'm impressed with the fact that you didn't lose your motivation, especially since it must have been very difficult, as you said, being a little bit alienated on the physics side when you started being interested in biology. Then the move itself, it makes you, especially when you move, like you moved to the other side of the world, it's a bit of a cultural shock. And it can be quite of a crash. And then you moved again, and then you moved again, and then you kept changing topics. And somehow you still have, I can see that very clearly, the spark for science inside of you. So I'm quite impressed. But I guess you had your moments of doubt, right?
A lot. Sometimes I even think of like, why these choices? Why have I made it so complicated for myself? Because to me, at the end of the day, it was like, I am looking at interactions between between genes, between tissues, and you're trying to characterize why they interact in certain ways. And I think that kind of thinking held me through. Because you go from molecular biology there, you see that there's this web of interactions between genes. And then you go to neuroscience, and then there, instead of genes interacting, passing messages, you have neurons passing messages. There's a lot of interconnection. My PhD was in statistical physics, and I would say that is the physics of interactions. And all we do is try to find model systems that are interacting. A non-interactive physical system is so boring for statistical physicists.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I see this point. Okay, so the key question or the key problem remains fairly similar, just the system changes. That might be helpful science-wise, I agree. What about challenges that were associated with all of these transitions?
Oh, yes. You go into a completely new field. Like when I entered the microglia field, I really didn't know where to start reading. You have all of these terminologies that have been, in the field for a very long time. And that hasn't helped in the transition, I would say. Certainly it was true when I was transitioning from physics to biology, because I was doing something in molecular biology then, and there were a lot of names of genes and experimental techniques that people do, and all of these technologies and concepts that were sometimes to me very strange. So there was a lack of language to begin with.
Yeah.
And that was probably the hardest thing to establish. How can I talk to biologists? And
I ask myself this, and I'm a biologist, so absolutely.
And it was also very strange because my supervisor is a physicist and he talks in the way of a physicist. And so I was the bridge between biologist and physicist. And I think that forced me to find a language and how to communicate between these two fields. And of course, that came with asking a lot of silly questions in biology. Like just the concept about working with a mouse model, for example.
It's not easy to comprehend if you just jump into this field.
Oh no, because at first you want to understand why timescales in biology are very different compared to the timescales in physics.
Absolutely, yes.
In terms of just how work progresses, probably for a physics project, you can do it in 3 months and you have a decent paper. But for biology, 3 months is nothing. It's not even...
Especially mice research. Come on, let's talk years.
It's like 3 months is not even enough to establish a mouse line.
No, but I'm proud of you that you know this now. That's
yeah, so that's kind of also the reasoning behind me moving from Norway to ISTA.
Yeah.
Because then I was looking for kind of a hardcore biology lab. Where they do a lot of experiments and be very close to where the data is and close to where data is being generated. that also kind of allowed me to understand the techniques, the details. You get to see every single part of a paper that's not in the paper.
That's true. Did you ever get to do anything in the lab yourself?
Unfortunately not. We had this funny story in the lab. I still have 100% kill rate in terms of mouse. I was just passing by in the lab one day, because in the lab they were inject ketamine and then see the effects of ketamine in the brain. And then one of my colleagues said, Ryan, do you want to inject ketamine on the mouse? And I said, yeah, because I was very much motivated in how to handle mouse. It was like a basic skill. I injected, the mouse bit me, and then the mouse died all of a sudden.
Oh no, that must have been very traumatic.
Traumatic in the sense of I was so guilty that I killed the mouse of a colleague.
So the thing about mice is that they are harder to handle than rats.
They are. That's what I've learned.
Also, they can really sense if you're stressed. So I guess she got even more stressed. Wow, what a story. I guess then you were not as keen on jumping in. Or it was not really that easy to join.
Yeah, because when I joined the lab, I really had this interest of doing my own experiments, because that's, even now as a bioinformatician data scientist, one of the things that you don't really get to do is to collect data. And so when I moved to ISTA, I was already thinking of a career path, actually, of becoming my own PI. And one of the things that I really wanted to do is to learn how to collect
That's sensible,
samples.
Yeah, agreed.
So in the lab, one person was doing multi-electrode array recordings. I sat with my colleague when he did the retina extraction. I sat through the whole thing thinking that I will faint, but I didn't. And so I said, maybe I can do this one, But then, pandemic happened. Then I was forced to stay at home. In ISTA, we had this rule of, I think, only 2 people per lab can stay in the campus.
Oh yeah, that was the thing. Yeah, we had to sign up, and it was very difficult to work. That's true.
My thinking then was, okay, I mean, yes, I do still like to learn how to do experiments, but if it's an option between me
other people,
and other people who actually need time in the lab, I would rather have the other person doing his or her experiment. Yeah, and then kind of the pandemic, of course, put a lot of stress on everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, and it also didn't really help my stresses in life, I would say. So yeah, I just at some point forgot that I wanted to do experiments. And that's and that's kind of why I bought my own microscope.
Yes, I definitely want to go into that, because this is really,
okay.
As we said, the science spark is still alive in you. I can see now 2 paths into which we can go. One is more self-reflective, and the other one is more steering clear and going towards the future direction. But I would like to go into self-reflective part if you want for a moment.
Yes.
So
I would love that.
Your story sounds really like it would require a lot of commitment and a lot of focus to really be successful in all of these transitions. Because, when you change so many times and you move from one place to another, you need to find your setting and to really learn the language, as you said, of the new science that you're doing. And you need to figure out how you're going to live and just the normal mobility issues that arise.
Yeah.
And yes, at some point the pandemic happened as well, which must have been very difficult similarly. And I'm just wondering, because in such situations, what I found through myself, and I just moved once here. I mean, I was shortly in Germany, but otherwise I was here. I ended up being focused entirely on work, and my life started passing by. And, when you have health issues, of course, you need to be mindful, but you want to do well. You don't have much time because, you don't get enough funding and all of this. So I'm wondering how it was for you to figure out how to stay yourself, or did you lose yourself, if you don't mind me asking? Because I could imagine this happening.
Oh, yes. I lost myself, my sense of self for quite some time. And I think the moment I stepped out of the country, I just had this mindset of work.
Exactly.
That's how you would succeed. Work, 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 and even like compromising your own health and mental health just because people are expecting work from you.
Yes.
Probably. Or you think people are expecting work from you. And then at the same time, you don't really know what other options you have. You don't know what's better, not even like knowing what's best for you, but you don't know anything better. In hindsight, I was just pretty much really naive into like how I approached life in general. How I dealt with work was essentially how I dealt with my personal life, so much so that at some point, there wasn't really any boundary between personal life and work. I had this excuse of I'm a scientist. As a scientist, I wake up, I think about science, I go to sleep and I think about science. That was the mindset that I was in. And oh God, what a destructive
Absolutely.
That's a very destructive point of view in hindsight, of course. But like I said, that time I didn't know anything better, and I really didn't realize that I was making a lot of jumps. Because of course, when you jump to a new field, you have all of the hopes of the world that you will contribute a lot.
Yes.
You'd make an impact.
Yeah, of course.
That's the competitive spirit in a lot of scientists. But it's this thing of a lot of things are not working out, and you're just pushing your way through it and just hoping that all of this work would be seen and
appreciated and still important. You put in the work, even though it doesn't work, but you still put in the work and you still do your best. Yeah, I know. That's the problem with science.
Yeah.
And academic culture in general.
Because with all of this stacked together, I mean, you've seen how many transitions I've made in my life, how many restarts, and things that I wasn't really aware of what I'm doing to myself. All of these combined with the pandemic, all of these stacked up just really deteriorated my mental health. Because like a lot of the things I'm saying at the moment, all of these are, as I said, in hindsight, and these are things that I got to reflect probably over a year ago, and I'm still reflecting on it, and I'm just trying to take note of decisions that I have made. I don't say questionable decisions because these things placed me to where I am now, and I think I'm
that
so.
That doesn't help at all.
No. But then I'm just trying to think of how can I make my life easier.
I think you're just trying to grow, and you finally have a bit of time and capacity to be a bit more aware of what's going on. Yeah.
Because this is something that I've also reflected on, that I probably needed time to step back and see where I am. That's kind of the decision I made when I decided to leave my previous postdoc position. I just want to see where I am, where my life has taken me. I managed through a lot of things. And with all of these transitions, trying to find where am I going is a very difficult question. It's also not helping because when you submit your CV, you had a copy of my CV, so you saw how much jump I have made and what things I've done along the way. But you see, a big part of my insecurity was with the fact that I am starting to be seen as someone who hasn't committed on something, who is changing his mind quite a lot. And probably a lot of this is also, I don't know, a judgment on myself.
I think it depends how you spin it, right? I mean, it can be sold also as someone who is very good at learning new things and transitioning, which is great for some companies. So it could be perceived as an advantage, but I can see how some people could question you about this, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yes. What I did to kind of break that gap, to break that cycle, was to decide that I just want to be an expert of something that I'm already doing.
Yeah, that's wise, yeah.
It was either doing bioinformatics or doing computational neuroscience. And then when this job came, I said, okay, bioinformatics it is. And bioinformatics also isn't like, there's a lot of crossover between ideas in computational neuroscience that you can
Absolutely. Yeah.
export, copy paste,
Totally.
I would say, to molecular biology and vice versa. And we're really trying to learn the language of bioinformatics because also bioinformatics is a very big umbrella.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Everyone has its own definition of what bioinformatics is. And learning the problems in bioinformatics and learning the language, the jargons, most especially, is something that I just committed and said, I will do this and I will network. I will not isolate myself because also with all of these transitions, at some point, you are the alien one, you're the foreign one.
I did want to ask about this.
Yeah.
Because when you move so quickly, it's really hard to find your base and your stability and your group of friends. Also, as a postdoc, if you don't join with a cohort or with a group of people in the same situation, it can be really hard.
It was hard. That was one of the things that I should have done as well. Have people who are in the same situation, if not similar to what you're going through. I didn't do that throughout probably a lot of my life. I had friends, I would say, but not friends.
Are you an only child?
Oh no, I'm not. I had an older brother and a younger brother, but growing up we were fighting a lot.
Okay, I see. So you learned as a child to be very self-reliant and liking your own company.
A lot of my life has been trying to be self-sufficient. I can do a lot of things. Everything I need is just around me, and it's just for me to find a way and take it. There's no concept of I need help.
Yeah, you need to deal with your stuff. That's
exactly.
Tough. I mean, on one hand, that could help when you change place so much. I tend to be, I wouldn't say antisocial, but more like I do like my own company a lot. I kind of gotten used to it as a child as well. I have a sister with whom right now I am very close, but we had our ups and downs. And I do believe that when you have to work so much as you work as a scientist, and also when you have to change the place, this can be helpful because I don't know, I think you start a bit at the higher position because you can rely on yourself and that's enough. However, when the things start piling up, I'm still learning how to be more vocal about what I may need and relying on people, learning how to do that. I think it's a big process, so I can relate to this definitely.
The fact is, I'm just talking here from my PhD because during my PhD, yes, I was in Norway, but I had shared supervision. So I had a supervisor up in Norway and I had a supervisor down in Trieste in Italy. And every 3 months I travel. And there wasn't really that much time to establish any routine. It was really stressful. And again, I'm talking here on hindsight, but I didn't allow myself to build stronger connections to people who are also in the institute where I was working.
Because it was all temporary for you in your head. And
I kind of learned it the hard way when I moved to Italy for the first time. Because in the institute where I was, it's the International Center for Theoretical Physics, and a lot of people from third world countries go there for a very short time to do a little bit of research, expose themselves in, current problems or things that could advance their own research programs. And so the timescales of people going and leaving, minimum 3 months, maximum a year. And so I've kind of learned it the hard way that it's not very easy to make friends if you're an academic because everyone is moving around. You don't get the sense of permanence until you become a tenured professor.
Or oftentimes also not at that point because you're already past the time when you were supposed to learn how to make these connections. That is true. Okay, let me approach this from the other side. So it must have been very hard. And I guess your supervisors were aware how difficult such project can be when you go back and forth. Did you at least get mentorship that would help you sustain yourself through this?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to call out any names. I don't want to go too deep into that. But what I'm asking more is, was there a proper support system?
Yeah, that was the problem. And it's one of the things that I envy so much of graduate students in ISTA, that it's more organized. There's someone who looks at whether you're progressing in your project or not.
Yeah.
And there is some form of mentorship. In my case, there wasn't really any. I moved year after year, just having negative results and things are not working and this and that. And both of my supervisors weren't really aware. They were only aware the moment I had to graduate. It was tough. Yes, in the end, I managed to do something, publish a few things, and had a good understanding of what I was trying to do. But again, in hindsight as well, they did give me a question that was probably not meant for a PhD student.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is...
It's common.
Yeah, it's unfortunately common, but as well, how I'm taking it at the moment is the concept that I was trying to understand is not something that you give to an academic baby. But then I think I still manage. That tells me that that is something.
Does it give you a sense of pride?
It does.
Okay.
It does. Now it does.
That's really good.
Yeah, I'm still in talking terms with both of my supervisors. They saw how much I've struggled, especially towards the end. Mm-hmm. I think both of them are also aware of that they lack mentorship skills. Yeah, it's very interesting from both of them to realize that aspect. They're very good scientists, but yeah, not really the best supervisors. And that, in a way, it reassures me that whatever I come across, this thing of I've transitioned to a field that I am the weakest at. And now it's like I've done this time and time again. And every single time I did it, I did something. And I did something that I could be proud of. And that, in a way, fuels me. And probably that plays a lot in the spark that science still has.
Yeah, I understand.
Me still being interested in science. Sorry, I'm digressing, but back when I was still in the lab, whenever I'm sick and I force myself to attend a meeting and talk about science, after talking about science, I just feel like I'm good. I can.
True. I mean, this can give you a lot of motivation. I understand.
Sorry.
No,
sorry if I digress.
I'm just like trying to figure out how I'm feeling about what you're saying. So on one hand, I am feeling extremely sympathetic. So I don't know if you have this thing, but I have this thing that when bad things happen, I push through.
Yeah.
It may get really bad, but then I somehow manage to go through it. And it's like life situations, work situations, health situations. Yeah. And then when I talk about this in hindsight, I tend to smoothen it out. So I say it as it bothers me less than it actually bothered me at the time. Yeah. And then people assume that it wasn't as bad as it was. Mm-hmm. I get this feeling that you're similar in this way.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good coping mechanism. But I somehow get a feeling that it must have been extremely hard for you. So I'm impressed of the progress that you've made on this self-realization and growth. I'm trying to do a similar thing. I guess I reached the point where I am feeling better, but I still don't have the sense of proudness of in anything that I have achieved in the last few years. Oh. Somehow all the bad stuff that happened has made it impossible for me to feel good about what I've done. Even though I should kind of see it this way, I still don't really feel it. So hearing you say that you can see way for yourself to be proud of it, I'm very happy for you, because I feel like this is a very big thing to achieve. And
thank you.
This is what can make or break your further career as well, because you want to feel the sense of accomplishment, because you want to seem like you have the achievements and you are proud of them and you know how to talk about them. So I'm glad that you reached that point.
Although I would say it took me time.
Exactly. So I'm hoping that my path leads me there.
I'm hoping as well.
What I'm seeing is that you are a very strong and self-reliant person, and you have been doing a lot what you expected from yourself and you thought others are expecting from you. Yeah. And now you are finally at the point where you ask yourself, what do I really want? And how do I really feel about the life? Science, sure. Love it, want to do it, great. But then what about life? Let's go maybe now into this. Let's go into the question of why you decided to leave the academia. I mean, you went over some of the reasons, I guess, in your previous answers, but I want to go into this a little bit more. What went through your head and why did you decide to step outside?
There were a lot of things in my mind then. This all happened after the pandemic, when people were not believing in the science. And even my dad was also an anti-vaccine person, and it was a little bit hard to cope with that. And it got me asking why that happened. And I was starting to doubt the whole thing about academia and the whole thing about doing science. And it's this question of, who are we doing science for?
Yeah.
And that kind of then transitioned to all of these thoughts of publishing. And at that point in my life, I felt like I was in this paper mill, which is a very bad thought, I would say. I don't know how it was with you and your lab, but we've talked a lot within the group of how much pressure ISTA is imposing on everyone to publish very high.
Yeah.
And publishing high, especially in my case where I was involved in a lot of different projects in the lab, I really felt like I had to increase my output even more. And again, this was after the time when Gloria was a PhD student in the lab, when we published in Nature Neuroscience.
Oh yeah, that was a good paper, yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you. I was so proud of that one as well. But after that, it just felt like, okay, Nature's Neuroscience, then higher, better, more work. And it's like, no.
Give us a bit of time to think, to enjoy the science.
There was no time to stop and think, be a little bit more strategic in how to obtain things, and not just like work, collect data, analyze, but have kind of a clearer idea of what exactly are we looking for, and what is this compelling and novel story that we should come up with, and what does it mean by compelling, and what does it mean by novel. And a lot of these things that were just playing around in my head. And again, it's this pressure to publish, and publishing on very glossy journals that have very questionable business acumen, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely.
People seem to know what the problem is, but then when asked to make actions on it, they seem to not be so much interested. The answer is always, I don't have time.
Yeah, you are always behind, actually.
Exactly.
You're always behind with everything, so there's no time to question anything.
Exactly. And everyone is always behind. And it's like, behind on what? Again, it's that feeling of being in this machine and just pushing. Ever so accelerating.
Yeah,
and everyone that was kind of probably one of the biggest causes to my breakdown. Academic research and science to me was like all in this pedestal, and then all of a sudden all the curtains
it's disheartening, and it just breaks you. I don't know.
It did.
I grieved over it. I grieved over the times when I believed that what we are doing is worth it.
Yeah.
I think it's also a question of leadership, because, when you're working, let's say at an institution, let's go hypothetical for a second.
Yeah.
And the institution puts a lot of pressure on obtaining funding and just getting the papers highly published.
Yeah.
Then everybody wants to fulfill this criteria. And I feel like it is very hard to be a group leader and fulfill those and still keep people inspired. I mean, it's achievable. I think it requires certain personality traits that not every leader in science has. But if you are a good leader, you can still make your people feel like these questions that you're saying, like for whom we are doing this or why we are doing this, they should be answered and they should be kept as the key questions. Of course, at the same time, you want to fulfill the institution's requirements or you want to stay on your position, But a good leader makes the scientists feel like what they're doing means something rather than helps your boss progress their career.
Yeah.
It should be more.
There's a lot of egotism,
Yes.
involved. And sadly, it's rather prevalent in a lot of research groups. And it is always the race to first.
Yeah. You don't want to get scooped, so you don't collaborate, and you
Exactly.
don't communicate your results because you want to be the first. That's part of the reasons why I felt disheartened about academia as well. So I can sign up under this.
For a very long time, I've always held this concept of scooping as rather, it should help science.
It's faster,
You have
right? Yeah.
same results coming from two different labs with potentially two different
But
approaches.
that's the problem. If the journals were publishing someone reproducing, first of all, that would help because then we would be reassured about the results.
Yeah.
And it would also help with establishing the methods that are actually reproducible. Because I was talking yesterday to another guest, and she said for her, the reproducibility, or rather lack of thereof at academia, is just a joke. This should be changed. But unfortunately, the ego-driven rules that are currently applying are not taking that into consideration. And that's very sad.
And what's also sad is that even people who do have the power, professors, PIs, who are higher up in whatever the academic ladder is, they don't seem to care, which is sad. And it's like this prevailing idea of, I got here even if these were the circumstances. So everyone beneath me can also...
Oh, absolutely. Super toxic. That's one of my key arguments always when I'm discussing the toxicity of academia. The perpetuation of suffering.
Yeah.
I suffered, I got to the high position, so whoever else works for me and they can manage through it, then they're going to be successful. Like, why?
Yeah. That's the thing that I kind of settling down on, this illusion of meritocracy. Because it's like science or academia is supposed to be meritocratic based on, your achievements. But a lot of people forget that luck has played a very big part as well in their different careers. So it's this thing of a lot of scientists forget their humanity.
Yes. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, agreed.
There already is a stereotypical scientist who is quirky and all and socially, inadequate. Those are stereotypes. And just because you're a scientist doesn't give you an excuse to be an asshole.
Yeah, let's not excuse ourselves by saying, I'm a scientist, that's how I am. The problem is that people who do see this issue, they may even try to break it. They hit the wall so many times and they just go away. And then people who are left are those who... So the problem is we keep losing the good people who could make a change because they just get broken and,
That was one of the factors where I struggled because I do think I have something. I could have started my own research group. I had some ideas here and there. But then this thought of like, if I'm going to leave academia, who's going to fight? Who's going to make it better? And if everyone who tried to fight and did not succeed and got frustrated left, then the ones who are still in academia, who have prevailed, who have survived, this gets to perpetuate whatever toxicity has been there. And so there was also a question that I had to face of like, is there still a way for me to contribute to these fights? And that's kind of where like doing science, citizen science outside academia.
Absolutely. Let's go into this. I think this is something that is a problem for many people with whom I talk because they were doing good in academia, then they decided to change their career, and this question of do I fight, do I stay, or do I go, and am I failing the next generations by not staying and fighting for longer?
Yeah.
while also thinking about yourself and trying to save yourself, which should be a very important factor. And then trying to figure out a way in which you can contribute while removing yourself from potentially harmful situation is difficult. And I feel like your science communication or, citizen science initiatives a very good way to contribute, because you can help to educate the public, you can help to communicate to younger generations who will become the scientists next. And you can still stay excited about science and give back, but you are no longer in a situation that was damaging for your mental health, which is also good. So let's go into our brighter spirits. Let's talk about your initiatives. One would be the AskBio, right?
Yes.
I feel like this is really cool. So let's start with this. How about you tell us about this?
I came across this advocacy. So AskBio stands for Accelerating Science and Publication in Biology. And it is a nonprofit organization who is pushing for the widespread use of preprints, especially in biology. Preprinting has always been a topic.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who see pros and cons, things in their mind, oftentimes against preprinting. And so AskBio was recruiting for fellows. And I kind of was interested in how can I advocate for preprints. I've always believed in preprints since I transitioned to biology. Preprinting is a common thing in physics.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
And when I switched to biology and then pitched the idea of preprinting a manuscript, people were just like enraged. People were worried that, their words, not mine, a certain group in China can recreate the study in a week and get the same paper out of it. So that was the prevailing thought. And I was like, okay, how can I help with this? And I was still a postdoc then. And then I was in this fellowship. They had a lot of different programs or projects that they were offering to fellows. And one of them was this community or like crowd reviewing for preprints.
Yes.
And I really love that. Love in the sense of preprinting is essentially you put your idea and your results into the world. And one of the things that people are in a way against preprints is that it's not peer reviewed. And a lot of it is just junk. How I saw it was like, if there is a feedback system to preprints, if we can comment scientifically on these preprints and not just like on Twitter, hey, great job, and and actually have
critical
concepts.
Yeah.
Exactly. Critical things that you want to say about the study. That would lessen the noise. Also for other people to see which preprints are good.
Yeah.
And in a way also be trained to see what papers are good and what papers are not good. Because peer review is something that's not seen.
Exactly. It's an enigma. I mean, I helped with reviewing a few papers during my PhD, which I was very happy about. And there was this initiative by developmental biologists called Prelights. And I put a prelight out there and I thought it was great. I had this discussion with the author of the preprint and I gave my comments and they actually replied. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. And I feel like if I was a young scientist and I had no idea how the peer review process works, what do people pay attention to and how do you even do this kind of visibility would be really great. I agree.
Exactly. Peer reviewing it's seen as kind of like a rite of passage for an academic scientist, but it shouldn't be. It should be open. The flaws in the paper should be seen. This is how people will learn how to critique a paper and what are the potential limitations of the paper, how did the authors respond to this one, that whole process of feedback, which is important.
Yeah, agreed.
The science is not anymore just the scientific method. It's about communicating it as well. And communication is not just a one-way thing. It's not just you publish the paper. It needs to be a two-way system where you say something and you get something in return, a feedback. And the feedback for a very long time is something that, I don't know, I was so mortified when I got my first review. it was a rejection. Yeah, of course. Just like how your work is criticized, like things that I don't know how to respond to this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are also cruel reviewers, right?
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. There are also reviewers who have lost humanity in some sense.
I think what is very important is that being on both sides helps you, because you start realizing, okay, on one hand, when I'm receiving a bad review and someone is just dismissing few years of my work in a few sentences, it hurts.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it makes you realize, okay, maybe I have to be a little bit more respectful in my review of someone else.
Yes.
And if you don't try this, you don't learn this. It also helps you to realize what are so common mistakes. I think there are certain things that keep coming back in revision. Sure, certainly some papers are sent out in expectation of getting certain comments because you want to send it out faster. But when you're learning and you're just starting a PhD, let's be honest, you're not the best critical reader of papers.
Exactly.
And you need to learn somehow. I learned through fire. I don't recommend, but that would be an easier way to learn how to do things correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope this works out.
Yeah, because reviewing is one thing, but publishing reviews is another thing. And what we wanted to do with this crowd preprint reviewing advocacy is to gather people, a crowd, a community, and all together read a paper and put some comments, criticisms about concepts, ideas, experiments, how things are done, analysis, blah, 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 all of these things. And at one point, because of course you have all of these comments and these can be like very basic questions even. But then at the end of the day, you have all of these comments from people who would read the paper. And they get published, and then the authors have the chance to address these questions. Of course, like, yes, the crowd lead, we also want these reviewing to be done in a fair way, that everything is constructive.
Yes.
You can criticize as long as it's constructive, as long as it adds to the paper, not just ask for an experiment just because.
Yeah. Of course, being sane.
Exactly. And in hoping that, these whatever little things that we do would propagate and gain critical mass.
I like this. I think this is a very good way of giving back to the scientific community while, not working in scientific community that closely anymore.
I've talked with someone and he had this comment on people who are not in academia anymore, who would be also in this community of reviewers. It's this idea of what's your business here anymore,
Yeah, don't I know it? Yes, I do know it.
I know. It's one of the things that, in a way, by me, who has transitioned out of academia doing it, in a way, show that it can be done, that people who are outside academia, they may be outside academia, but they may still be good scientists who can still understand and criticize the paper.
And care about good science being done, right? So
exactly. And our business with academia is that we want to make academia better.
Yeah.
You're
touching on something that I'm struggling with on a common basis now that I'm no longer, lab working person. And I still want the situation to be better, whether it is for the students within the consortium that I'm working for, or just in general. I want to be heard. It's not like I lost all of my science bones from my body as soon as I stepped outside of the purely academic career system. I like the idea of using the term science adjacent for all of the people who do not perform strictly academic research careers,
I like that as well.
But then stay close and still want to give back. Whether you are in administration, you want to help in developing better programs for students, or you want to help with their career coaching systems, or whether you are in industry and you still care about science. I mean, come on, industry is part of the community and also publishing and also relying on paper. So why should you not have a vote in what's going on?
Yeah.
I totally agree.
And then everyone should have a say on science. And this is how we get people to think and be able to criticize the things around you and be able to identify which one is an okay information, which is not an okay information.
Oh, come on. That's a big topic. I don't think we have time to go into this now, but seriously, there's a lot of issue with the public and the reception of news or scientific news, and then being able to let them know how to recognize these things. It takes a lot of effort to rebuild the trust in science, and I feel like by closing the doors and windows and everything and saying, oh, anybody who is outside of academia, you do not have a say, that doesn't help with the public trusts either.
No.
It's the public money that funds the science very frequently. So there should be more of this communication or feedback, as you said. So all of these initiatives, I am totally up for. I feel like it has to be sane, there has to be rules, but anything that can improve the visibility, in the end, it may speed up the process, because that's another thing, right? Before you send the paper or preprint and then you publish, there's so much time that passes through. If you get some comments from someone faster than your reviewer, you can start working on things to improve your results.
Exactly.
So hopefully this will work out.
I really hope so as well. The organization itself is doing a lot of different things around preprint. So if there would be listeners who will be interested in contributing to this advocacy.
Oh, that's great. Yes. We will put the link in the description.
That would be great.
Of course, I will keep an eye on this when we promote the episode as well, so that it's out there. Okay, we are really talking. I mean, I don't mind.
I don't mind as well.
It's gonna end up being a long episode because I don't want to cut out too much. That's fine. Let's speed run.
Yes, sure.
There's at least 3 more things I want to touch upon. So one would be your microscope. Please, let's do this because I'm curious. My husband is curious. We were just talking about this. Let's dive into this quickly. And then we go into 2 other things.
Yeah, microscopes.
Is it a proper microscope? Tell me more.
So it's a compound microscope. So it's kind of like a proper microscope, not the kids' version. It's a compound microscope, and I have always wanted to have one. And by always, I actually meant during the pandemic when I was cultivating my own yeast, because there were no yeast around.
Right, Vietnam. We also had this problem. We never could buy yeast. Like everybody started baking bread or something. We were stocking up on yeast. Yes, that's true.
I was one of those people who were baking their own bread. And I was growing yeast, and I was always very curious. Oh God, how do these things look like?
This is very cute. I love this.
And also because I experiment on when you feed your yeast. So we have your 1 part yeast, 1 part water, and then 1 part flour. Now the water you can use, I don't know, apple juice, for example. And depending on the water, how your yeast grows in time also differs. And I was just like really curious.
Yeah, the source of energy changes. Exactly. The sugars, that's important.
And I was just like, how do these guys look like?
Also, you were looking at budding yeast and trying to understand how they divide or what?
No, I wasn't. That was during pandemic. I only bought my microscope, I don't know.
Okay.
Very recent.
Now I get it.
So that was the motivation.
Did you check this?
Yes, I did. The moment I got this microscope, I just was... If I was not too disciplined, I would stay up late and go to work without sleep at all because I was just looking at things under the microscope for hours.
This is insane.
Yeah, and it's this thing again of just looking at how things are in those scales and going back to this very qualitative science of just describing what you see. At some point I was even trying to find, okay, can I find mitosis? Can I find...
Yeah.
I was just experimenting whatever I can put under the microscope and bought my own.
I wish I would have known. I would have showed you my chickens at Easter, my developing chickens. This was awesome to see.
Oh God, it just brings me a lot of joy to see complex things. And it gives you a certain appreciation to a lot. evolution, the whole shebang.
You're such a nerd. I mean, seriously, this is amazing. Yes.
Yeah, it really gives you a different sense of being. I'm really being cheesy now. It gives you a sense of being here, being alive, and being, surrounded by all of these things and the processes that are just around.
Look, I'm not judging. I'm a person who literally every day since I started the new job and there's a blue sky, I walk like this, my head up to the sky, and I'm happy, and I take a picture of my joyful face with the stupid blue sky because I'm so excited. I don't know whether this is like a bit of a crisis situation, but I am enjoying the day by day, and I'm enjoying everything that I realized that I haven't been seeing because I was so preoccupied with work. So
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, I'm not looking for a microscope, but I do get the cheesiness. I like the cheesiness. Okay, weird thing, but it's kind of like you regain your life back.
Yes.
Because you give so much to academia, you don't even realize. It just keeps taking from you and taking from you, and you put so much. It's not only time that you put and work that you put, but all of your focus and all of your, mental capacity just goes into this because you are committed to your research. And now suddenly, I know you are committed to your work, but it's a little bit different, and you regain all of this time for hobbies and projects, and ask yourself, what do I actually really like to do? Because this is something that I keep asking myself. I do have a lot of things that I like, but I just forgot. We should talk separately about making some cool stuff to watch under the microscope.
I am just so excited, We have a lot to talk about after this.
We are getting a coffee for sure. Come on, there's no excuse. You are in Vienna, so 2 more things.
Yeah.
Books. Come on, Ryan.
Yes.
I know you're an avid reader, so let's talk
my
books.
God.
I want a recommendation for someone who wants to read something non-fiction, science themed, a book that changed your life maybe, and then something else, something cool, something that you would recommend me to read, or you think everybody should read. Let's go.
First is a non-fiction book that changed me. There has been a series of books that for some reason involve a mathematician. His name is broaden. Hopefully I pronounce his name right. He is a mathematician who contributed a lot to one of the many important topics in math, and then at some point in his life decided to be a hermit. And his story was just in many books that I read, When We Cease to Understand the World, When Einstein Walked with Gödel, his name was always popping out. And I was just like, who is this man? And why did he become a hermit, just like disappeared? A lot of mathematicians were just waiting for him to solve the biggest problems in math, and then poof, he's off the grid. And mathematicians have tried to locate him.
Oh my God, this is a cool story. I haven't heard about this.
Oh yeah, that book started the whole questioning of science, the unveiling of the curtain, I would say. Yeah, those books changed me in a way. Also because I read this book rather recently, not a long time ago, The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee.
That's such a good book.
Oh God!
I gave it to my intern 2 years ago. I think 2 years ago. Georgi, I'm talking about you. I gave it to my intern because he was a brilliant intern. The best intern I've ever had. And I was like, he will stay in science. I want him to read this book. This book is such a great book.
It makes you appreciate biology in such a very different way.
All of these stories, I feel like you want to know the humans behind the science, because this makes you understand how they got where they got. Yeah, it's a great book. I do have 2 other books of his on my shelf that I haven't read yet. One is The Emperor of All Maladies about cancer, and the other one is The Song of a Cell, which I was given to by a friend. They are waiting, and yes, they will be read.
I started reading cancer because that's essentially what the company wants to treat. And oh God, the first chapters were in a way disheartening. Kind of like, okay, I'm not in a headspace at the moment.
Oof. Oh my god. Yeah, there are books that you have to postpone.
I'm not in a headspace at the moment.
I think I'm also not in the right space at the moment for that. That's why it keeps standing on that shelf over there. I think Gene, yes, 100%
Yes.
great recommendation. How about
Yes.
something else?
So if you are interested in neuroscience and how the brain works, The Spike by Mark Humphreys.
Okay.
It takes you to the journey of a spike from the retina all the way to movement. It's really cool. It's it takes you through different regions in the brain and what they do and what the neuron does and all of the complexity of a neuron. You should totally read it.
Love this.
It gives you another kind of appreciation for neuroscience in a way. If you're interested in how mathematicians do their thing,
Yes.
because like one of the things that I in a way regret, but I don't think there's even a playbook for this one. Like, how do you do research as a theoretical person? And how do mathematicians work?
Okay, so I have a friend who's a mathematician who is listening to this podcast, so he will know I talk about him. I tend to ask him this a lot, especially during our PhD, because I would see him living fairly reasonable, balanced life.
Yeah.
And all of his work was just like happening out there and in his brain. And yeah, I still don't fully comprehend it. But it's a cool thing, right? I mean, the amount of focus and self-discipline you have to have, I would say it's a bit easier to sometimes, when you have a bad day, just go and do mindlessly a lab work than really focus and do the math work. So what's the book? Tell me.
It's called Birth of a Theorem by Cedric Villani. So Cedric Villani, he won the Fields Prize, which is kind of the Nobel Prize for math. And in that book, he kind of records his day-to-day leading into the publication of the paper that won him the Fields Medal.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Definitely ending up on my list. We have a nice few recommendations.
That one I really appreciate. I mean, you can skip all of the theorems and, you can always just read all of the terms as jargon, but you get to appreciate how their ideas have progressed and kind of just gives you a glimpse of how these people in the higher ups of mathematics operate.
That's a nice recommendation.
Yeah.
I may not get the full math of it, but...
No, you don't need to.
It sounds like a very good premise, so I'm gonna have a look. Overall, Ryan, I can see us exchanging ideas about books for another half an hour, but we need to wrap it up. So before we wrap it up, let me ask you one last question. Your whole story is a very busy one. Let's call it like this.
Yes.
It's a story of transitions, of sometimes very quick choices, then rethinking it back, a story of trying to figure out a way for yourself, a story driven by curiosity, I would say as well, and definitely a story with a certain mission related to science. So, from your unique perspective, what advice would you give to other people who are going through something maybe not entirely exact, but more like going through the challenges of changing their place of living, changing their topic, changing their career from academia to industry? What's one or two things that you would like people to hear from you?
The first thing really is to learn to communicate and talk, because probably a lot of the things would have been simplified by learning how to say help. And that's a tough one. I know it sounds very easy, but it is very tough. Yeah, learning to communicate, because that is one of the things that will allow you to understand that you're not alone, that there are other people who may be in a similar situation as you. Of course, you can also do therapy, but that's a more expensive avenue.
Well,
I would really recommend one.
You need to learn how to communicate with yourself as well. That's a venture that is hard to do alone, so I agree.
Exactly. And for these kind of things, having a psychotherapist really, really helps. But again, it's communicate. It's learning to talk and learning to step back and listen to yourself. That's very hard, I know. And pause for a while and just... I don't want to say just, because that's such a...
Oh, it's not easy. Come on.
Ponder on where you are. Your body physically tells you what it's feeling. One of the things that kind of helped me in the beginning, before I realized that there was a lot of work that needs to be done, was to do, oh God, now I can't remember the word for it, mindful meditation. Mm-hmm. And it's taking 5 minutes a day to scan your whole body. Just sit down and move from your head down to your toe. How are you feeling?
I find it extremely tough.
It is tough.
I think it's my anxiety that is just interrupting it. But I agree that your body is telling you stuff. I feel like I learned this only when I got sick.
Yeah.
So when I found out that I'm sick and I needed to learn to listen to my body instead of constantly telling my body, you're gonna listen to the mind. It's one of the things that I learned to appreciate from my disorder. Even though, there are days that I hate it, many days.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I am grateful because I learned how to be more at peace with my body and also like not constantly fight against it.
Yeah.
Because, it's all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So mindfulness, I agree, it could be good. I am totally incapable of learning how to do it.
Yeah, it takes experimenting.
Mm-hmm. I guess I gave up maybe too quickly.
No, it's okay to give up. This is also one thing. It's okay to give up.
Yes. Did you listen to the second episode?
Yes, I did.
I had this thing with Ashley that I didn't know her, and she said something like, it's fine, you have my permission to quit.
Yes.
And I was like, I'll take it. So please listen to Ryan.
Yeah.
The message is important.
Because people have told me in the past to learn to say no, but that's always very hard. The goal is that you give yourself permission to quit.
Certainly. However, as scientists, we are extremely ambitious and
we are
constantly comparing ourselves to the other people. Not even because we are taught how to do this. When you're applying for a grant, you have to be competitive and you have to compare yourself to the others because you will be compared to the others. And that's how the whole process works. And it makes you so self-conscious and so self-doubting that you reach the point when you are not sure whether you want to quit because you are weak.
Yeah.
You have a moment of weakness. That's why I think external signal that it's fine, it's also important. Of course, ideally, you would like to be this grown-up adult that can reach that point. But that's also therapy. I think that's also personal growth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we are totally different than we were last year. Come on.
Exactly. You're a totally different person than you were yesterday. It's not just like learning how to quit, but taking a step back and brushing the dust away, stand up, and learning to continue.
And taking vacation without working.
And taking vacation. Guilt-free, work-free.
I think we should close with that. Guilt-free vacation. I advertise this.
The goal of the vacation, to me, is to be so much away from work that I'm so excited to go back to work the following. that to me is the goal of a good vacation.
Agreed.
That you've been away enough.
Yes. Let's close with this. Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
This was a pleasure and really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed it as well. And I do hope to see you around Vienna for coffee.
Definitely.
Yes.
Take care. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good night.
This was Kasia Kuzmicz-Kowalska and Science on Trial and Error. Thanks for listening and good luck in your quests beyond academia.